Welcome again, everybody, to our session, Creating Engaging Lessons Online and in Person, with our subject matter expert for today, Gracia Maria Mendoza. Our host will be my friend, Melita Brukella, and I'll be the moderator of this session. Let's start the session tonight with a land acknowledgement. As you learn with us during this dialogue session, we encourage you to reflect on the land we are on. While we are spread far and wide, the TESL Ontario office is located on the treaty lands and the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee. This session will be recorded. As you know, this is TESL Dialogue, and it's a recorded session with audio and video on, preferably. So there's audio and video that are located at the bottom of the screen. You can select the button to turn your audio and your video on and off. You're free to turn your video on and off when you wish to, but we highly encourage you to turn your video on so that we have a more lively communication with you all. There's also a chat option that is located at the bottom of the screen. You can chat with all the attendees, and you can also ask the subject matter expert a question. You can use the chat for both of these purposes. When you want to chat with everybody, please select everyone to chat publicly. If you want to chat with somebody privately, please select a participant's name to chat with them privately. There's also a raise hand button. The raise hand is there to respond to a question out loud. If you wish to do so, whenever we pose the questions to our audience, please feel free to raise your hand and you will be given the floor. When the moderator calls on you, you are free to unmute your microphone and share your great ideas with all of us. So select the reactions. That's where you find the raise hand button. Select the reactions and then click raise hand. There are polls, but not in this session. If there is a poll, it will appear on your screen and you select the response, but we're not going to use polls today. Live transcript. We have the option of the live transcript, and you're free to use closed captioning options. If you decide to do so, please select the live transcript and click on the live transcript button. Select show subtitle to see closed captioning, or select hide subtitle to hide closed captioning. The last, courtesy and respect. Please unmute yourself when asked by the moderator. Otherwise, please mute yourself so that we hear the person who is talking. Please avoid interrupting or speaking over someone else. You will all be given a turn. That's why we're here. Also try to keep your comments to no more than a minute so that everybody has a chance to participate. Disrespectful or insensitive comments will not be tolerated, and the moderator may choose to remove someone if necessary. Okay. So that was all for me, and I'll hand it over to Melita to start with our presentation for today.
Thank you very much. I want to just welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us, and let's begin. Just going to share the screen with you. And of course, I can't find it already. Oh, goodness. Just give me a minute, please. It's my first time, folks, so please forgive me if I make it a little bit sloppy. I'll try my best.
Okay, we can see it now.
There we go. Yeah. There's that beautiful face. I'd like to welcome, oh, somebody else isn't in here. I'd like to welcome Gracia Maria Mendoza. She's been an educator for 29 years in the TESL field. She is the recipient of the Virginia French Allen Award for Scholarship and Service 2018. She is the founder and former president of HELTA TESL, as well as the former president of LAC TESL, a former board member and chair of the Finance Committee TESL International Association. And she currently works as an education specialist at USAID Honduras. My goodness, that's a mouthful. Please welcome our presenter. The first question is, what is the key to engaging lessons?
Well, thank you for the introduction and thank you for having me today. We were talking that it's been a while since we had this conversation, the first TESL Ontario dialogue a while ago, and from then you have had a wonderful topics. When it comes to engaging lessons and things that I have learned during 29 years teaching at different levels from K-12, higher education, adult education, teacher education, I think what I have learned is that the key is knowing your learners, understanding their needs and what is meaningful when it comes to learning for them, right? What makes them excited and what piques their curiosity. I think those are key aspects. Then when it comes to actually teaching and actually having those lessons, I think what I have learned, and especially during the pandemic, I think this has become even more relevant, that it is important to diversify the tasks. It can be the same content, but the way that you approach it each time, it has to be different, even if it's the first time you're doing it, or even if you're going to reinforce that topic. It should be different, it should be varied. And when you are teaching the same level, for example, you might say, oh, I'm going to use the same lesson for the same students, even if they're in different classes. You have to vary that too, because different students, different groups will mean a different context. So it has to be varied. And also you need to make the needed adaptation because you're going to have different students in a multi-level course, for example, or with different cultural backgrounds. So you need to make sure that you are differentiating and making those adaptations. Well, I think, and we know from evidence that it is important to create habits and routines. You always want to have the pinch of the unexpected, right? The continuous change and things that make your students anticipate what is going to happen in your classroom. And it's not only going to help you with engagement, but also they're going to be thinking about your next lesson and your next class. It's going to be that feeling of what will our teacher come up with next, right? And you want your students to have that feeling and that anticipation. I think another thing that supports engaging lessons is keeping the blocks of teaching short, especially when we are online, right? We want to keep those blocks very short. And the pandemic has shown us that technology has bridged the gap. Yes, video conferences has brought us together, but it also makes us tired a little bit quicker than when we are in person, right? So especially when we are in that online setting, keeping those short blocks of time, like 10 to 15 minutes, is usually helpful. And it works with learners at all ages. When you do it in person, it might be a little different because you can have engaging lessons in a different way because you have that human connection, and then the times will vary. But I think that it is important to have those snippets of activities that learners are going to use to engage with the topic in different ways. So while there's that key thing that I said at the beginning, knowing your learners, keeping in mind diversifying your tasks, having short blocks of time to keep your learners engaged, I think is important as well to create those engaging lessons.
Thank you. Thank you, Grazia. Knowing your learners, that's so important in everything we do, in every single activity we build. So any other ideas you, our audience, have, or experiences, or what you consider to be the key to engaging lessons? I can see Mitra is saying the keys can be divided into the topic and purpose of the task. So you share a task with your students, right, Mitra? That's what you mean? And then you try to clarify what the topic is and what the purpose is. That's great. Thank you. Other ideas? What is the key to creating engaging lessons with your students? What is important to you? Specific pointers for adult learners. Sana is asking for specific pointers for adults.
So specific pointers for adults, I think this is where knowing them becomes even more relevant because, for example, with children, we know they go to school because their parents sent them. But adults have a different purpose, and their purposes can vary. It can be for they want to learn another language or specifically English for the purpose of traveling. So you need to understand what their purpose is there, or for professional advancement, right? They want to get a job which requires English and they need to have certain skills. Or they might be interested in learning English because they are in business and they need to do business transactions. So this is where knowing your learner becomes more relevant because that way you can tailor what you are doing in your lesson to the needs and the interest of those learners. And you might tell me, well, it's going to be very difficult because in a classroom setting, I'm going to have 10 different adults with 10 different needs and 10 different interests. And that, yes, it's true. But what we need to do is find those similarities and then vary those activities to address all needs and interests and meet those personal purposes and objectives.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you about that, Grazia. Great. Motivation. Naina is saying that motivation is the key to engagement, and Grazia was just talking about it. Knowing what motivates our learners. If it's kids, it's their parents. They know they have to do it, right? But especially when we're talking to our adult groups, they are there because they have specific reasons, right? So their motivation is different, and knowing that really helps us create activities that will help them move forward. Excellent. Francine is sharing that making sure the level challenges, but is not so difficult, it frustrates the learner, right? It's like the information +1, it has to be a bit harder, but not +10 harder, because that makes it extremely frustrating for our learners. So knowing them again, right? So that's a key element there. Thank you. Thank you, Grace. Interesting topic delivered with enthusiasm. Adrienne is saying, I agree about diversification, anticipation, and short stints. However, for newer teachers with less materials, perhaps, this can be quite the challenge. Any suggestions here?
Well, that's really true. And even for not novice teachers, preparing for lessons of this type can be challenging because it requires a lot of planning. I would say, and I will tell you from my own experience when I was a new teacher, I graduated from a bilingual high school in my country, not prepared to be a teacher, but I decided to get a job in order to support my university studies. And the jobs that I was getting was as an English teacher because I spoke English. Just because I spoke English, they said, you can be an English teacher. Interesting, right? And what helped me in those challenging times, because I had no preparation for a teacher, I didn't know how to plan a lesson, I didn't know how to set up a classroom and organize things in the classroom. They only gave me a book and they said, this is the book you're going to be used to teach and you're going to be using for teaching. And what I did is I talked to people. And I was fortunate enough, and I hope that in every context we can find good teachers like the ones that I found, is I was fortunate enough to find teachers who were willing to share with me. Teachers with more experience that were willing to sit down with me and actually help me with the lesson plan. So creating those support networks in our schools, if we are experienced teachers and we know we have a new teacher, even if it's an experienced teacher but that is coming new to our institution, they have to learn certain things about our institution. Create that support network. I think that's very helpful for new teachers. Also create spaces. Usually we have meetings that could be an email, and instead of those meetings that could be an email, let's make our meetings productive and make them a space to share our best practices and our lessons learned from the classroom. And that way, if we have new teachers, they can learn from our experience. So I would say those are two important suggestions that I would give based on my experience.
Thank you so much. Those were two great stories you shared. And yes, it's challenging for newer teachers. I would also say, if I may add, that you can also ask a more experienced teacher whether you can attend their class whether you can just spend some time in their classroom, and you will see that some teachers really love that. So that could be another way to see how they organize their classroom and learn from them even more. I know there is the practicum, and I know, but we never have enough time to really learn, right? It's ongoing. So that could be another way. And then being here is also learning. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Mary's saying, allow a variety of ways to participate. So variety for our students based on different personality types, particularly online. For example, using polls, chat, small group work. So using diverse ways of making your students engaged and interacting with them so that we can address all those needs our students have. And that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Maisa is saying creating lots of hands-on activities so that they feel participating and they feel they are contributing. Our students feel that they are contributing to our lessons. Good afternoon, Sally. John is saying for adults, be willing to put the lesson plan aside and be spontaneous, go in a completely different direction and work in language skills within their context based on their needs, right? It's a bit hard when you have to follow some guidelines from the institution, but definitely you can make necessary changes, right? Once you address your students' needs, they feel that they are being heard, they feel that their needs are being addressed at the end. So yes, variety even here. Davey is sharing incorporate technology. Even in class, right? Even when we are in person, get students moving, like standing up, I guess, right? That's what you're referring to. Offer them choices in the classroom.
That's a great idea. I love that one. Really interesting. It's hard to get them moving sometimes because they slump in and, you know, they've got their kids or whatever they need, and they're just waiting for that lesson. But movement is the best. Get that circulation going, enthusiasm. Wake them up a little bit and wake ourselves up too.
Oh, yes.
For sure.
For sure. Yeah. Anyone else would like to share? You can always use your microphone. Please feel free to do so. Or you can type in the chat and we'll be reading them for you. But we would also welcome you to just use your microphone. Great. Any other ideas? Total physical. Yes. TPR, right? Total physical response, Naina, for sure. That's needed for adults, not only for children, right? Not only for our younger students. That's needed for everybody. Great. Question to John from Mark regarding going off the lesson. Do you plan exploratory teaching? Do you plan it?
Yes, I sort of have a toolbox of activities. I coach an ESL conversation groups. And so there's always resources there, and there's always some language skill focus. But if the conversation goes off in a completely different direction, I follow them. I'm in a more unstructured ESL teaching environment, so I'm able to do that.
Right.
Great.
Thank you, John, for your answer. Yes, because we have the challenge, but when we have the opportunity to go with the flow and to accompany our students in their needs, we can always do that, right? Great. Okay, good. Melita, I think we're good with this first
Good
session.
to go. Let's
Thank
see
you, everybody.
if I can do it again.
Of course you will.
Of course. Am I going the wrong way, folks? I am. All right, our next question. How will one set up a lesson to maintain sound classroom management and learner engagement? Great question.
Great. Yeah, that's a great question. And
It is.
as we were mentioning and we were discussing, it is important to create those blocks, right, that help our students focus and shift the focus when needed, but creating those small blocks of learning. When we are in, and I think in the chat, Mary mentioned it, when we are in online platforms, vary the formats and don't abuse them. Like, don't focus all the time on polls because you found it that they were motivating, but if you do it all the time, then it becomes boring. So vary within a lesson the formats you are using. Maybe the first time it's going to be a poll. The next time it's going to be a breakout room. The next time it's going to be silent reading. The next time it's going to be working in pairs. But the next time it's going to be working in larger small groups. Or the next time, and Zoom offers you, of course, the poll tool, but they also offer you the annotate tool. And it allows you to put those little stars and those little checks and those little figures. And if you create your slide and have them interact with your slide, that is very useful. So creating blocks of learning, creating varied formats of learning is going to help you with that classroom management because you want to keep them on task, but also with the learner engagement because they're going to be shifting from one thing to the other with the content that you are presenting to them. There are also several tools, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that after, but there are many things out there on the internet that you can use to spice up your online classroom, but even spice up your in-person class. Because in-person doesn't mean not using technology. We can also incorporate technology in the in-person classroom. And most of the tools that we have been using online work very well in person. So make sure that we're incorporating technology, or we're incorporating different material that is not necessarily designed for learning, but it's part of the real world. How do we bring the real world into the classroom, right? To bring those real life experiences and those real life materials that will spike curiosity, but also critical thinking and also questioning. We want our learners to question at any age. Even if it's very young learners, teenagers, we want them to question things that are happening because that's what brings those fruitful conversations and that's what brings that engagement. Also, for example, if you feel it has to be, and I think most of teachers have this experience, you need to be able to read your audience, right? What is happening when you see their faces? What is happening? What is going through their minds? You have to notice whether it's getting boring and you need to make a quick change. Or like John was saying, don't feel afraid to leave your lesson and go into something more spontaneous. And I have found even in very structured settings, because I have worked in very structured settings and then settings that are a little bit more free, that even in a structured setting, you can actually go away from your lesson and then adapt for that lesson to happen in another way. And that, of course, requires experience and that you have done that several times, but it is possible to do that. And that has to do with reading your audience and understanding at that precise moment whether you are losing them or whether they are engaged in what you're doing. So I would say that would be those would be my thoughts for this question.
Thank you, Grazia.
Thank you.
Great thoughts and ideas. Very good. And now it's the turn is yours, our members. So what do you think? So I'm sharing the question here again. How will you set up a lesson to maintain sound classroom management and to keep your learners engaged? I see Debbie saying playing interactive games, Quizlet and Kahoot, keep our students involved in learning, and I'm sure we've all used them, and those are great tools that we can use. And then Mitra is also sharing, when these factors are carefully considered, topic, purpose, focus, students' needs, knowing their preferred learning styles, their age, their interest, their motivation level, and add a taste of diversity and variation to your materials, and delivery. Make your class engaging and collaborative. It's not the same monotonous, boring class, right? So so our students are really interested in what's going on today, right? Is it the same or is there something different happening? Padlet, right? So Naina is adding to what Debbie was saying, right? To the tools we're using. So yes, Quizlet, Kahoot, and Padlet, and so many other apps that we have now during these 2 years learned to use and not forget using, right? So as Grazia was saying, why not keep using them in our classrooms as well, not just in an online setting. Sally is sharing with us that a good idea is to think in advance, planning about how learners will participate and how they will use a variety of techniques. And then make sure instructions are clear before starting each activity, especially if it's a new activity that our students have never been involved in. Our instructions need to be clear, but always for that matter. So great point, Sally. Thank you. Yes. Ebera, carry your students along and include their inputs. Active participants, right? So invite your students in what you're building in your classroom. Follow the cycle of well-planned and well-delivered lesson. So planning, planning, and planning again will help us create, build engagement. Francine is also sharing that if it is an unstructured content program, ask the learners what topics they want covered. That's interesting. What's practical and useful for them to learn? So if it's unstructured, we have the freedom to do that. And that's a great point. Thank you. Thank you, Francine. Grace, such as brainstorming, presentation, practice, and application hands-on. Thank you, Grace. Yes, thank you for elaborating what you're sharing, the cycle of the well-planned lesson, right? So you brainstorm it, then you present, and you also apply it. Excellent ideas. Anyone who would like to take the floor and share any other ideas you have? Anyone?
I would like, if Mitra doesn't mind, I would like to have her expand or give us some examples, if that would be okay with her. I love it when these factors are carefully considered. Topic, purpose, focus. Do you have any personal stories maybe you could share that have worked for you?
Oh, I don't know what to say, but thank you so much for being, just inviting me to the floor. So I mentioned, all those factors based on, my teaching experience, mainly working with adults. So it's very important to understand them fully. Otherwise, we can lose, their attention just like this. So depending on, the topic and the purpose of the activities that we have planned, I do actually, still believe in having, a plan, even, structured, or some other times, as John mentioned, we can just, put it aside and then, go to another way. But John, I have to say that I disagree with you to some points, because for conversation classes, this is absolutely right. And it perfectly, fits the content, right? Because I do, the conversation circles. We usually have, a page of, let's say, topic with some questions, because we have, diversified, let's say, participants. So we see that sometimes, one question posed by one participant takes us to another direction.
Right.
But in my opinion, in some focused classes, like, communication courses, presentation skills, I'm talking about, mostly college level. Okay. So there we have to have, that focus. Otherwise, the students at the end of the class, they say that, okay, what was the point taught today? What we learned today? So that's, the reason that I am myself, a type of person that even, I'm not writing my lesson plan anymore, but I have it, here, and I know how to develop it, how to improve it, and how to deliver it, and then, keep my students, to a, let's say, good ending at the end of the class.
Great
and always,
point.
by asking the students the feedback and, some other stuff like that.
Most certainly. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I remember my first class online several years ago, and I would welcome everyone, and there were crickets in the room, literally for a very long time. And I thought, I'm a failure. Absolutely fail. There's no camera. There's no one talking. A few tears were shed and everything. And then slowly, as they got used to my voice and it's a safe space, I had to explain what that meant as well. They slowly started to engage, but it's difficult at times. Very difficult.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you have to try out, right? You have to experiment different tools and see what works for you, or even what works for different groups of students. I've seen that what works for one classroom doesn't work for the other one, right?
Absolutely.
And Sally is also sharing needs assessment frequently. Mhm. So we get to know our students better while having needs assessment as well, and then we tailor our lessons based on that. Having a great rapport with our learners is the key, Grace. Could you elaborate more on that if possible, Grace? You can unmute yourself. Yes.
I'm not prepared to speak, but I think building the trust between your learners, right? If they know that you are dedicated, passionate teachers and you just deliver the lessons with enthusiasm and you respect your students, I think they will give it all and you will be rewarded as a teacher. I always say it's a dual process, you know, they gaining so much from our expertise, but we also learning constantly from this varied population of students.
That's great.
So true.
It is. We're all learners, even though we are their teachers and instructors. We're still learning a lot from them, and creating that relationship, setting it up since day one is very important. Sana is asking about tips for encouraging students to keep their cameras on. Oh, that's $1 million question.
Come on, Grazia, you can do it. I know you can.
Well, I think, why do we need them to have their cameras on would be the question. Do we want them to keep the cameras on to make us feel comfortable? Or is it because it's part of an objective of what we're doing in the lesson? So I would say that it will depend. If the objective is make you feel comfortable, then it's not a good reason to have them have their cameras on. Because like you were saying, Melita, you want to create that safe space. And if for some students, keeping the camera off because we are at home and maybe we have some privacy issues and we don't want to turn on the camera, then we just let them have the camera off. There are going to be always students that want to have their camera on, right? And that have that need, and that's okay. So I would say, again, read your audience and understand why they are not turning on their camera. And if you really need them to have their camera on for specific things, make an agreement with them at the very beginning of the lesson and say, for example, so for the purposes of this activity, when you speak or when you give your opinion, I'm going to ask you to turn your camera on, and then you can go back to camera off. So you're giving them alternatives, and then having those agreements will create that safe space that you were talking about. And especially in this context that we're working on still after 3 years, we need to make sure that we have that safe space, because that's going to go, again, connect with engagement. If they feel comfortable with their camera off, but they're still engaged, that's a good thing. If they feel comfortable with their camera on and helps them with their engagement, that's good too. So it really depends, and you need to read your audience and understand what's going on. And I think at the very beginning of the term or your semester, it will be a little bit difficult for them to have the camera on. But as you move through the term, it will be a little bit easier for them to turn it on. And if you give them the space to have the option and the alternative, I think that works.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Gracia. Mark is asking, what do you advise when the lesson falls completely flat halfway through?
Well, that has happened to everyone here, right? I know it has happened to me. And first thing is, don't stress out. If you stress out as a teacher, your whole class will be stressed out. So you take a deep breath and you use extension activities that maybe you had in your lesson plan. You do a little bit of brain breaks. You do some exercise, relaxation. You do a little bit of mindfulness exercises. Or maybe you tell them, we're going to have a 5-minute break. I'm going to let you go to the bathroom or drink some coffee or whatever. And then you go back, right? But key here is, do not stress out, because you're going to stress out your students. So, and that happens, and it's not a big problem. you're going to solve it, and the next time it's going to work better. And I think after a session that has failed or a lesson that has failed, what I like, and I like to engage with students in self-reflection at the end of a process. And and there are two ways of that I do self-reflection, like immediately after I finish a lesson, and maybe a week after we have finished a lesson. So for the immediate reflection, I would ask them, what happened today and how did you feel about this? And then I will get input from them, and I will learn from that reflection why the lesson didn't go that well. And then a week after, I will maybe ask them again to remember that lesson and what happened, and then they will give me a whole set of new perspectives. And that is helpful when we have these situations when a lesson fails. And that happens. But don't feel bad about it. It has happened to every teacher in the world.
Thank you.
Great, good, great conversations. And there's so much support and so many ideas shared in the chat. So thank you everybody for giving ideas to Mark and to all of us for what to do when we have nothing planned, right? And when the lesson really is going not in the right way. Thank you everybody. I think, Melita,
Wonderful.
We're ready for our next question.
Yes, ma'am. Are you ready, Grazia?
I am ready.
Wonderful. What tools would be useful for an engaging online or in-person lesson?
We have many tools out there. I would say there's a wealth of tools, and different tools work in different contexts differently. And the only thing that we need to do is explore them. I will tell you a little bit about the tools that I have used recently and even before the pandemic. And it's because I have liked to incorporate technology into my classroom. I find it very valuable, and I find that it's part of this 21st century skills that our learners should have at any age, right? And for example, recently with the pandemic, what I have been incorporating a lot is the Google suite of tools. And Google has great tools for maintaining engagement, both out in person and online. We have Google Docs where students can collaborate together and synchronously and both asynchronously. Also, we have the Google Slides. And for example, these two tools, the way that I have used them is by dividing them in a Google folder by groups. And I would do two things: either send them in a group to work on the Google Doc from an article, for example. It can be reading the article and answering some questions, or it can be that I break up the article in sort of like a puzzle, and I have them put the article together in the Google Doc and then answer some questions or reflect about the topic. Or I would use Google Slides. Maybe they have listened to something, we have watched a short video, or we have listened to an audio or a podcast, and they will create 5 takeaways from that audio or that podcast or that video. And they would put it on the Google Slides, and then they would present it to the whole group. That's what with Google Docs and Google Slides. Google also has Jamboard, and I find Jamboard to be great. Jamboard is like having your whiteboard in the online context. So just the same way that I would send my students to the board and divide the board in different sections and have them work in different things, either individually or in groups, I would use Jamboard and the sticky notes to do that. And Jamboard is very good because you can see it when you share your screen and see people actually engaged and working. And if they sign in with their user, you can see who's doing what and who would need your support, right? If I use these tools in a breakout room, I have found it useful, and I don't know what your experience has been, but when you go into breakout rooms, we want to replicate what we do in person, which is going around the groups and seeing what students are doing. When we do that in breakout rooms, I have found that some students find it invasive, and then they disconnect when they see me go into the breakout room. So with the Google tools, what I found really useful was that I could see what they were doing without necessarily going into the breakout room. And I would tell them, if I had a group that really felt uncomfortable with me going into the breakout rooms, I would tell them, If you need my help, call me and I will go into your breakout room. Because I didn't need to be there to know that they were on task, because I could actually see them in the Google documents or the Google Slides or the Jamboard, right? So I think Google is, for me right now, my go-to tool. We also had, like somebody was mentioning, Padlet, that allows you also that collaboration and allows you to monitor engagement. And it creates those nice, very colorful galleries. So Padlet is great. Flipgrid, with which you motivate and build those skills related to speaking and making a video and listening as well, because peers are going to listen. We also have Nearpod, and I don't know if you have seen or used Nearpod. Nearpod gives you a library of content ready to use or that you can customize, and even things for assessment. So those are great tools to use, and this work both in person and online. Somebody was mentioning Kahoot, Mentimeter. Those would be to take a quick pulse and see how things are going. I would use those for that. There's also VoiceThread, and VoiceThread allows you to have like a slide or a picture or a video, and then comments can be either written, recorded as a video, or recorded as an audio, and they are around. So that creates another sense of collaboration. So all those tools can be used in different ways. Online, it can be for the synchronous lesson engagement. In person, they can be used for graded assessments that you're going to do in your classroom. So there would be different ways in which to use those tools. And these are only some of the tools. There are many, many tools out there that I know you might have used, and that maybe you can tell me right now that maybe I haven't heard of.
Yes, tell us more. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Grazia, for sharing the tools you use and for explaining how you use them in your own classrooms, online or in person. Yes, please tell us. As Grazia was saying, we're eager to hear from you. What are your go-to tools? What are your most favorite tools that you've used so far? And if anyone is new here, if we have newer students who might really feel overwhelmed, don't worry, take one tool at a time, right? So we're not supposed to use all of them all together at the same time. So no worries there, no pressure. Okay, so what tools do you use for engagement? Please feel free to use your microphone and tell us your most preferred tools.
And I think while people are thinking, Loretta, I would like to say also games, right? Game-based learning or gamification, and differentiating both things in understanding that game-based learning is actually using the games. Things that I like to use when in person are Scrabble or charades, right? Those are great games for the ESL classroom. And then when we are going online, we can have those video games that are ready to use. Now, a key thing to keep in mind when we're using games is we need to explore them first, because we have to know what we are using them for. And you have to play the game. And I remember that I would use this with my higher education students, and I would actually play the game and go up all the levels to make sure that I was giving them, like somebody was saying before, the right level of challenge, because I didn't want them to become frustrated. And then gamification, which is using the elements of game in your lesson. And that means going steps or going levels and getting badges and those are things that are interesting even for adult learners. I have found that those things are relevant and meaningful to them.
Wonderful.
Lovely. Yes. Well, Mark is saying YouTube. Simple, right?
Right, Mark. Yeah.
It's always there. Naina is sharing polls, multi-user on whiteboard. Very good, Naina. Thank you. Sana, Word Wall offers a variety of activities similar to worksheets. Sana, would you be willing to share more about Word Wall and how you use it, if possible?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
So, of course, WordWall is just a platform that gives you a variety of games. So you can have sort of sorting activities where, for example, if we're teaching occupations and there's adjectives that want to go underneath each of those occupations, the students can just drag and drop things into it, as well as, you know, the classic word search and, you know, kind of like climbing to the top of a wall or whatnot. But there's just such a variety. I think on a free account, you can create up to 3 games, but, you know, you can delete it and put it back on, whatever the case is. But that's all I can say about it for now.
And thank you for sharing it.
Thanks, that's great. Yeah.
Ebere, for cameras, I like to give students options. Oh yeah, you're referring to our question before. Yes, giving options for sure. Discussion forums. Right. So using discussion forums. Ebere, would you like to also share more about how you use them and what you've seen your students do? How engaged are they?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear
Yes.
you very well.
Okay. I find that the students are freer to express themselves on discussion forums. So if you have something you want to do in the future, you can throw it open in the discussion forums and then get their feedbacks before class starts.
Very good. Yes, that's great. Thank you. So as long as our students participate and that's great. And as long as we're able to see them progress in their language skills. I also have a message, it's a direct message about links to some useful tools. Absolutely. We can provide links to use online and face-to-face learning. Like we can write them down and maybe even share with them after this session.
Sure.
We'll try to do it while the session is ongoing. Adrienne, Canva is good for projects and graphic design stuff. That's what we use. We use Canva for TESL Dialogue. So our presentations today are used through Canva and it's great. It's absolutely great. And as Grazia was saying, we can use it ourselves as instructors, but also we can teach our students how to use them and then they become the presenters, right? So it goes both ways and we're building those 21st century skills we were referring to earlier that our students will really need moving forward. Thank you, Adrienne. Great points. Thank you, everybody, for all your contributions. That's great indeed.
Yeah, it is. I find the students sometimes are very competitive when they're playing games, that it can be very, it's actually quite a joy to see them and they would, speak in their language and I'd say speak English and I don't know how to say this word in English and he was cheating. And I think that's what makes it lively and ongoing. You want to present something that they can entertain themselves with and you just step back and observe. It's the best teaching tool. So thank you so much. Wonderful.
And they are learning while having fun, right? Yes. Great. Let's move on, Melita.
Let's do it. Yes, ma'am.
Good.
What have your experiences been in both formats?
Yes, well, so my experience has been, and a takeaway for me after doing this for many, many years is that I need to plan carefully. And this is something that we need to keep in mind. However, I don't want this to mean that we cannot do it or that it means a lot of work. It does mean a little bit of more work when you're trying this at the very beginning, because if you're going to incorporate tools, you might need to create tutorials and you may need to create materials to support your learners in how to use the tools. But it is after several lessons that you have planned and that you have delivered, then it allows you to mix and match things. And then even, and somebody mentioned it in the previous part of the discussion, have learners contribute to build the lessons together. After you have had several lessons that you have modeled, you can even ask your learners to create the lesson based on the content that you have to deliver. And that, I think, it's very important because it not only helps with motivation, but it helps creating agency and that ultimate goal that we have as teacher of being long life learners, right? And it also, like Melita was saying, takes the control away from us and gives it to the students, which we want them to have that control, because in the end, they're going to be out of our classrooms and they're going to be using the language in a context where we're not there to support them. And we want them to have that control. So I have experienced that. So at the beginning, yes, it's a heavy lift, but then we can have the learners have that control and actually create those lessons. And when I do that, when I really relax my level of control and give it to the learners, what I have found is that it heightens their creativity, right? And it brings their own experiences to the context. It also helps me have conversations that I would not have otherwise had if I not had them, if I not had allowed them to have the control. It also makes time fly. Like recently I delivered a teacher training for around 60 hours, and it was Saturdays, 3.5 hours every Saturday. And then teachers would say, I don't want this course to end. I want to continue doing this. I don't mind that it's a Saturday for 3.5 hours. I don't feel those 3.5 hours here because they're always doing something that is keeping them engaged, and they feel that they have control of what they are learning. So it makes time fly, and then the learning experience becomes more memorable, which means it's not only that they're going to remember you as their teacher, but they're going to remember the content that you're teaching. And I have to say that it isn't always perfect. And Mark's question hit right there, that we can have lessons that have failed. There are ups and downs that we need to keep in mind. But reflecting, talking to them, what is happening. Sometimes you're also going to have learners that might not be into the activity thing too much, and that will be maybe more passive learners that learn a little bit more just by listening and not being very active. Then you sit with those students and talk about the kinds of experiences that you want to see, right? To make sure that everybody is included. And again, going back to Melita's words, keeping that safe space in the classroom going. So I think those are the things that I have experienced when teaching both in person and online. Making sure that we are planning carefully, that we have those self-reflection spaces, but above all, that in the end, after a certain process, we are letting the learners have the control of their own learning.
Right, thank you. That was great, Grazia. Learners have control. They have a say. Autonomy, right? Right, Naina. And now make the students get involved in taking decisions, motivate them. So make them have a say in what they are learning. Even in their assessment, sometimes we're really skeptical when it comes to assessment, right? But giving them options, I've found that it really works for students when they have a choice. For instance, during one of my courses, what I do is that I give them options to submit an assignment in 3 different formats. Like, for example, record themselves, make a video, or maybe make a PowerPoint presentation, or maybe make a Canva presentation, depending on the tool they are more comfortable using. And of course, after having instructed them and taught them how to use those platforms and given them all the necessary tools they needed. But I find that giving them options makes them feel that, yes, I can choose. I have a freedom to do what I feel comfortable doing. Absolutely. Very good. Great. So what has worked for you so far? What is it that you can share with us? Any other ideas? Anything you'd like to add? So how important is autonomy for you in your classrooms?
We have another question as well from Adrian.
Can you suggest good tools to make tutorials?
Yeah, usually I make my tutorials using Word. You can also do them using PowerPoint. Canva is a great tool. It's a great new tool to do tutorials, and I might just save them into a PDF to make sure that they can save them. I have also used, and I don't know if Microsoft provides that anymore, but there's and forgetting right now the name of the tool in Microsoft, but it's one that it's used in Microsoft for newsletters, and that helps you create very good tutorials because it has the different boxes in which you can save the information, and it helps you create those tutorials. So I would say use any of the Microsoft tools or use Canva. You can also do tutorials on Wakelet. So recently I have been incorporating Wakelet into online, and it's very similar to Padlet, but what I like about Wakelet is I can save my sessions one by one. So I can add the tutorial at the beginning and then maybe the recording and the materials. So I would suggest those tools for making tutorials.
If you could please share the last tool with us, Grazia, that would be nice.
Wakelet,
The Wakelet.
Wakelet.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, wonderful.
I have a question about how participants here can copy the links. You can just click on the link and it opens up, or you can copy and paste, I think. No, you can't. Zoom chats do not allow us to do that. We'll try to send you a link of all the tools we are mentioning today.
Or they could save the chat, I think. They could save the chat. No, I don't know.
The whole chat. Select all.
Yeah.
Yes, you can select all. That's possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can see what happens after selecting all. Okay, so that's a technical issue there. Opening the links will help, and then you can save them later, right? Sana is saying Zoom is good for creating tutorials. Yeah. Yes, you can record yourself while going through the tool, while using screen share. Right, but we also have to be careful and make sure that the video is going to be there for a longer time. The Zoom links expire, so try to be careful with that if you choose Zoom, but it's great. PowerPoint presentation allows you to really record yourself as well, and to make the voiceover tool can be used. Thank you for the Wakelet link. Captura, yes, Captura is used. Kaltura, right? Kaltura is used as a tool for tutorials too. Some institutions offer it for free as well. So there are so many tools out there, and I would also advise you to contact your own institutions and see what is there for you. So what do they provide for free, something that you should not pay for. Yes, I've tried Kaltura, Naina, with my students as well, for them to submit their work. It was part of the LMS, of the learning management system we're using in the college, and it was so easy to use. Thank you for sharing that. Any other tools that we didn't cover so far? Anything that has worked for you? Anyone else? Anything else you would like to share, or we're good? Okay, can we move forward then?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Melita.
Thank you. What recommendations would you give to both pre-service and in-service teachers, please?
Yeah, that's really important. So plan ahead of time. That's my first recommendation, right? Everything you're going to do, explore it first. For example, I was using one game that's called Trace Effects that the U.S. State Department created for learning English. And it's a great game because it brings not only the culture of the language, but it also talks about women empowerment, the environment, and different important topics. But what I did is I actually played the game from beginning to end before actually incorporated in the classroom. So plan ahead of time what you're going to do with the tools and the things that you're going to incorporate that are usually new to your students. I would say also start simple, especially for pre-service teachers. Start simple, don't overwhelm yourself, and don't feel bad if something doesn't work out. Right? Take baby steps. With everything that you're going to do that is new, take baby steps. Be workload smart. There are many things that we want to do, and we ourselves create our own huge workload. So if there are out there things that are already ready to use for you, Don't try to create the wheel. They're there, use them. If you need to adapt them, go ahead and adapt them. But don't feel bad about using ready to use things. That doesn't mean that you're a bad teacher. That means that you're a smart teacher. And things maybe that you can quickly customize, because maybe it can be that they're there but they're not exactly what you wanted, but you can use the foundation of what they have already done and just adapt it. So be workload smart. Talk to your learners, talk to your participants if you're training tech teachers, talk to your students even if they are young. So if you think, young learners, I have to do everything for them and tell them what to do, no, talk to them too. You're going to be pleasantly surprised with a lot of input that they can give you. So talk to your learners, ask them what they want to see, how they want to engage with learning. You will have plenty of ideas that you can use not only immediately, but for future lessons and with other groups. So always talk to your students. Once you have created a model in your classroom that you think is effective for learning, try to have your students replicate that model as well and see how they feel about it. And then they will come up with new ideas that will help you in other lessons. So have your students also do the work. And I have gone back to what Melita said, create that safe space for learning. That is so important. Make sure your learners feel comfortable, that they feel that they are able to speak their minds, to say what they're thinking, that they feel that whatever they have to say, it's going to be important not only to you, but for their peers. So creating that safe space is really important. And finally, self-care. Teacher self-care, teacher well-being, that's extremely important. I know that we hear this all the time, and usually we are told this all the time, and we say it's impossible, but don't take work home for checking. Even right now that you are working from home, limit yourself to the hours of work that you have to work. Don't work any extra hours. Leave time for your life, for your family, right? That's very important, because if you are a teacher that is taking care of yourself, you are going to be also taking care of your learners. So those would be my recommendations.
That's very powerful, very powerful. Thank you for that.
That's such a great advice, Grazia. And I'm sure that all of us here have found it so hard to do. It has been extremely hard during these 2 years to balance our life and our work and our jobs, or job, even one, but most of us have been struggling with more than one, and or even not at all, right? For that matter, it has been hard these 2 years, but it's hard. It's hard to really draw the line between I'm not answering emails, I'm not grading anything tonight or today. That's a hard line to draw, and I think we've all tried to learn throughout the way. So it's a great reminder, and it's a great recommendation for sure. We're human beings, and in order for us not to burn out, we have to take care of ourselves so that we can do this for the long run, right? Thank you so much for that. So what about you? What are your recommendations as experienced teachers, or as teachers that have been around for some time now? What recommendations do you have for pre-service and in-service teachers? Planning, that was a very good one, and that's definitely a very good one, Grazia. Plan ahead and then start with simple things and try them out yourself. So I wrote them down. Great tips. And be smart, right? Work smarter, not necessarily harder all the time, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Really, if you don't have anything on hand, ask for help. I know as instructors, as teachers, we're always willing to help. At least we are. We try, right?
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Maisa is saying ESL library. That's a good start for many new teachers. Yep. Mm-hmm. So you can go to the ESL library and look for information.
Yeah,
and
thank you,
activities
Maisa.
and ready-made materials that could work for you. Indeed, it's a great resource. I'm sure it's referring to the ESL library. Yes, Grace. Adapt content that you already have. So use it differently, right? If you really find it hard not to find new content, maybe repurpose the ones you have. Surround yourself with supporting group. Yes, the network you have. So build your network, like connect to people who are experienced, reach out to them, and for sure you will find support, and they will share their information with you. Lingua House, it's another app that provides good tips and activities. Mitra is saying, whatever you're planning to use in class, be sure that you know it first, right? That you yourself know it, avoiding confusion, avoiding distress for yourself and your students. That's a great advice, Mitra. It all goes back to preparation and to knowing what you're teaching to your students. BBC Link, thank you, Naina. Great tools, great apps, thank you. Sally has a question. Could you please recommend resources for academic English in link settings?
And link settings would be, sorry that I don't know.
ESL settings.
ESL settings. Okay, I think Oxford has great, and I don't know if we are allowed to say names of editorials or not, but I think Oxford and National Geographic have great materials for academic English. I especially like Oxford's Q Skills for Success. It has everything for academic English, for listening, reading, speaking, critical thinking, skill development. If you want to use Oxford, yes, additional materials that are out there, I would recommend, and when I was teaching undergraduate students, I used to go to NPR, which are podcasts that are very good for academic English, and it's everyday news, and also VOA News. And the good thing about VOA News is that it has all topics that you would ever need. And for example, I was teaching in an agricultural university, so our focus would be on the agricultural topics so that they could get the language related to agriculture, but it has topics related to everything, and it's the Voice of America News. The British Council also has great resources for academic English. And what I like about the British Council is that it has materials divided by levels. So it has for young learners, it has for teenagers, it has for adults to develop all the language skills, and even to develop pronunciation, which is usually something that we don't focus a lot in the classroom sometimes. So they have a variety of resources that are ready to use, that you don't need to buy, and that are just there available. So those would be some resources that I would recommend for academic English.
That's great. Yes. There are so many resources, and I see, Oxford, National Geographic, Sally.
Right.
Definitely a British Council as well. Great question. Thank you for that, Sally. And thank you for your answer.
I hope it's helped.
Grazia.
Great information.
Okay. Other comments, recommendations, questions, anyone?
Okay, that's my cue, I bet, right?
Yes, it's breakout rooms time.
Excellent.
Yes. So, okay. You're free to share your screen, Melita, so that we share with you our breakout room question, and I'll be opening the breakout rooms just now.
Do you think you are going to implement any of the concepts we discussed here? Which ones and why?
Great to see you again. So let's start from, as I was saying, every breakout room will share their experience with us and what is it that you discussed in the breakout rooms. We hope you had enough time. There's always an issue there. So let's start with room 1. We had Adrienne, Abera, and Grace. If one of you could please share, what is it in particular that you would like to use in the future?
Okay. So I was in room 1 with Adrienne and Grace. From discussion, okay, let me talk about me. Right now, my mind is not made up on, I would like to explore everything to see what works for me, for what circumstance I'm in. So what I would need for listening might be different from what I would need for reading or for writing a situation. I'm going to go back, take my time, and begin to look at all the different suggestions.
Thank you, Abera.
Wonderful.
That's great. Anything from Adrienne and Grace? Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I
Adrienne?
just want to add, just as an overview, we had kind of an interesting room because we had a new teacher, we had an old teacher, and kind of one in the middle.
I did that on purpose.
Yeah, which was very useful because we had different needs and different interests. Some wanted more online information. I think we were able to kind of, you know, in kind of a ping pong quick way, trying to share some ideas that were useful, like related to movement. That was one of the things that I wanted. Grace was interested in kind of more online activities. We talked about doing stations in the classroom, for example, which we didn't talk about in the webinar, but that was helpful to me. I like the Flipgrid suggestion, so I commented on that. And then we also, I think, talked about, you know, sometimes also our students can help us with, let's say, technical needs, or we can tap into their resources.
Great.
Did I miss anything, guys? Guys and gals?
Great. Good. Thank you. Thank you, group room 1. Let's continue with room 2. That's great. Debbie, Jagdev, John, Maisa, and Manal. Anyone from you who'd like to share what you discussed? It's a big group. John?
I can make just a few comments.
Yes, please.
I think picking up from what Adrian was just saying is getting input from the students themselves and not having to think that we have every answer or the whole knowledge bank. And so if there's a topic that we're not too comfortable, I mean, maybe it's banking, just to point that out. You know, what has your experience been? Where did you have problems? How did you, you know, you kind of build up a mosaic of input from them, or, you know, it could be sports or whatever the topic is.
That's great.
Great, thank you. Anything else from room 2, or?
I think Maisa may have had something.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Oh, so also in room number 2, we were talking about good planning for students and how to make them busy most of the time, and try to vary your strategies and your ways, your style of teaching, maybe using different activities. And we also were talking about the online teaching, and it's really a bit a challenge for the teacher and for the students themselves. So we were talking about some tips that, like, how can we as teachers develop our skills in using technology, maybe, and how to keep students' attention all the time with us. Yeah, and also Manal, she gave us a lot of ideas from her experience, like how to deal in certain situations with the students.
Lots of sharing. That's good.
Great.
Thank you, Maisa. Let's move on to room 3. We have Mark, Mary, and Mitra. Smaller group, great discussions, I'm sure.
I'll just on behalf of
Mary,
the group,
thank you.
We talked about, so Mitra is in Seneca, using a lot of the tools, Google Docs, Padlet, and Blackboard, the Seneca platform. And she will take some of the online learnings and bring that into the classroom. Mark is trying to capture all the links and all the tools that were talked about today. He's very organized, it sounds like. He's got his list, and as he has time, he's going to go through and try each one of them. And I do one-on-one tutoring online. That's my thing versus classroom. And so I'd like to learn about the new tools. And Wakelet and Captura are two that I want to look at those and see what can I adapt to just one-on-one, because it's a different dynamic, right? We talked a lot about, there's a lot of tools out there, and we talked about it in this group, just to try one at a time, take a bit at a time, don't overwhelm. Otherwise you may end up using none. And then just that learning is continuous, and they, we all enjoy lifelong learning.
Absolutely.
I don't know, Mark and Mitra, if you have anything to add.
Anything? You're happy?
Mark, do you want to add anything to what Mary said?
I think she did a great job.
Okay. That's great. Thank you. It's Cultura, if I'm not wrong, really. Yes. I'll try to find the link and give it, share it with us here. Room 4, we have Farah, Naina, Renata, Sally, and Sana. If one of you could summarize, it would be great. Room 4, anyone?
Sorry, you said Farah, right?
Farah, yes. You joined.
Okay, so yeah, we were discussing some of the platforms that we've been using since we were teaching online. I was telling them that for the past few years, I was teaching both online, like hybrid, and in person for most of my students. And we've been using Brightspace, we've been using Microsoft Teams, Zoom, what else? And other tools that are online friendly, especially for my practicum when I had to go for an online observation because I couldn't do it in person for some reasons. So I've used a lot of online tools such as live worksheets, which could be utilized very well for ESL students and could be amended for different levels. That was very helpful and useful for students because especially with the online, you don't need to have a lot of complex instructions that are difficult to be understood. We also spoke about the CLB, which how useful it is throughout our teaching as well and learning. I would say it is the #1 reference I would definitely go for whenever I need to teach so that I know what and how to teach, especially when we look at expectations. And that's it from my side.
That's good.
Lovely. That's a lot. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Clear ideas. Anything else Group 5 would like to share before we close? Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We know it's over 4:30, but you're still here, so that's amazing. Anything else from Group 5, or shall we move forward? Okay, silence means no. Melita, if you could share the last slides, and then I'll take over. We have Grazia's information. Okay. So here is Grazia's information, her email address, as well as her LinkedIn account, in case you would like to contact her. Don't forget that this session is recorded and will be soon viewed on YouTube, so you will still be able to access this information. Thank you.